The shit is wicked on these mean streets, mean streets.
Dear God, I wonder, can you save me?
We're heading out to Queens, New York, so meet us on the South Side. For this one, we're digging into the roots of how Queens earned the infamous nickname Cop Killer Queens, a reputation that began to take shape in the late 70s and early 80s. A lot of that history ties back to the man we're covering today, Ronald Bumps Bassett. Now, Bumps might not have the same widespread recognition as some of the bigger names that followed him, like Lorenzo Fat Cat Nichols or Kenneth Supreme McGriff. But make no mistake, his impact on the streets and the legacy of Southside Queens was just as significant. Even though his name doesn't ring out as loudly in mainstream circles, it was immortalized in 50 Cent's legendary tracks like Ghetto Quran and 50 Bars of Pleasure, 50 Bars of Pain. Bumps set the tone for what would come later, laying the foundation for a generation of hustlers and street legends. His story is a key chapter in the saga of Queens' transformation from a borough of promise to a breeding ground for street power and infamy. Let's take it back to where it all started. What people who are close to the streets know is this: there probably wouldn't be a Fat Cat Nichols or a Supreme McGriff without Ronald Bumps Bassett laying the groundwork first. His influence in Queens' underworld was undeniable. Now, while there isn't a lot of clarity on exactly when or how Bumps got his start in the game, what we do know is that he came up under the guidance of John Pops Freeman. Pops was a major player in Queens during his time and had established deep connections with the Italian mafia, which gave his operation a significant edge. By the late 1970s, Pops Freeman decided to step back from the game. Instead of letting his empire crumble, he handed over the reins, and more importantly, his mafia pipeline, directly to Bumps Bassett. This move not only solidified Bumps' position in the streets, but also paved the way for him to expand and influence the next generation of Southside hustlers. Without Pops Freeman's blessing and connections, Bumps' rise might not have been possible. And without Bumps, Queens' underworld as we know it might look completely different today. What we'd go on to learn about Ron Bumps Bassett is that he didn't even need the mafia connection handed down to him. Sure, it gave him a leg up, but Bumps had the vision and hustle to transcend the traditional game. He wasn't just another player running the streets. He was a game changer, and his forward-thinking approach left an indelible mark on Queens' underworld. Bumps saw a new direction for the hustle, a shift from the small-time, scattered mom-and-pop style operations that dominated the drug trade into a full-scale, industrialized model. If you think about it, Bumps essentially revolutionized the game, turning what was once a fragmented business into something streamlined, efficient, and much more lucrative. He took the streets from corner stores to Walmart-level operations by introducing a level of organization, structure, and innovation that was unheard of at the time. Bumps didn't just play by the rules, he rewrote them. This transformation not only boosted his own empire, but also laid the foundation for others like Fat Cat Nichols and Supreme McGriff to build their own powerful legacies. Based on the research into the South Side of Queens, John Pops Freeman, and Ronald Bumps Bassett, it becomes clear that Bumps wasn't just a disciple of the old ways, he was a visionary. According to numerous sources, it was Bumps who made the bold move to cut ties with the mafia, a decision that signaled a seismic shift in how the drug trade operated in Queens. Instead of relying on the mafia's middleman operations, Bumps had the ambition and audacity to establish his own direct connection with Colombian suppliers. This move was more than just a business decision, it was a declaration of independence. By going straight to the source, Bumps not only secured a better price on product, but he also eliminated unnecessary risks and middlemen who could jeopardize his operation. This strategic power play didn't just elevate Bumps, it made him a legend in the game. With better pricing and a steady supply, Bumps could expand his empire rapidly. He didn't hoard the opportunity for himself either. Instead, he put others on, setting up workers and building a network of trusted individuals who operated under his banner. Ronald Bumps Bassett didn't just run the game. He built a system that elevated others, and one of his most significant protégés would go on to be a legend in his own right, Lorenzo Fat Cat Nichols. Fat Cat would rise to become one of the biggest drug suppliers in Queens and arguably New York City, but his journey began under the tutelage of Bumps. Bumps had established a distribution network that was nothing short of revolutionary. His operations stretched up and down the East Coast, supplying multiple cities and solidifying his reputation as a mastermind in the game. He had effectively turned what was once a localized hustle into a regional enterprise, and this infrastructure became the foundation for Fat Cat's meteoric rise. However, Bumps' reign came to an end when a federal indictment out of Baltimore caught up with him. The heat from this case forced Bumps to step back from the game, and in a move reminiscent of his own mentor, John Pops Freeman, he handed over his Colombian connection and the south side of Queens to Fat Cat. Just as Freeman had passed the torch to Bumps, Bumps now passed it to Fat Cat, setting the stage for a new era in Queens' underworld. This transition wasn't just about survival, it was about legacy. Bumps' decision to empower Fat Cat ensured that the network he built would not only survive but thrive under the leadership of someone who had the ambition and ruthlessness to take it to the next level. Fat Cat would go on to make his own mark, but it was Bumps who laid the groundwork, proving that the true measure of a kingpin isn't just how they operate, it's the empire they leave behind. Ronald Bumps Bassett's status as a lifer in the game meant that even after his first downfall, he remained tied to the streets. While it's unclear exactly how much time he served following the federal indictment out of Baltimore, what is clear is that Bumps never fully stepped away from the hustle. Fast forward to December 2009, Bumps found himself back in the crosshairs of law enforcement. This time, he was caught on DEA wiretaps, which revealed his continued involvement in the drug trade. Despite his legacy as a pioneer and mentor, Bumps' inability, or refusal to leave the game behind, ultimately led to him being entangled in yet another legal case. His story is a testament to how deeply ingrained the streets can be, even for someone who had already built a legendary legacy. For Bumps, the game wasn't just a means to an end, it was a way of life, and that commitment kept pulling him back in, no matter the cost. The DEA's decision to tap Ronald Bumps Bassett's phone likely stemmed from his notorious history and enduring influence in the game. Given his legendary status and previous ties to large-scale distribution networks, it's no surprise that law enforcement kept a close eye on him, suspecting he hadn't completely stepped away from the life. The investigation uncovered a heroin distribution conspiracy involving Bumps and about 20 other individuals, showing that even decades after his prime, he was still deeply entrenched in the drug trade. The feds seized 7 kilograms of heroin and nearly $500,000 in cash during their operation, further proving the scale of the operation. For his role, Bumps was sentenced to 210 months, which is 17 and a half years, in federal prison in order to pay a fine of $17,500, essentially $1,000 for each year of his sentence. Despite being a legend who helped shape the drug game in Queens, this final chapter of his career shows how the streets have a way of catching up with even the most seasoned players. Without Ronald Bumps Bassett, it's hard to say if Lorenzo Fat Cat Nichols would have risen to the level of power and influence he achieved. Bumps was the architect who laid the foundation, cutting ties with the mafia to establish direct connections with Colombian suppliers, effectively changing the game. He transformed the Southside Queens operation from a local hustle into a multi-state distribution network, setting the blueprint that Fat Cat and others built upon. Bumps' resilience under federal pressure further solidifies his legendary status. He served his time, kept his code, and re-emerged to live a seemingly normal life, no small feat for someone with his background. If the rumored documentary becomes a reality, it's bound to be a must-watch for anyone interested in the roots of NYC street legends and the evolution of the game. Salute to a true OG who not only held it down but influenced generations of hustlers to come. All right, we still in NYC, headed uptown. Meet us in Harlem, right in front of the Apollo Theater. This story takes us back to the early 80s, a time when Harlem was buzzing with legends and the streets were filled with cats making moves. We're talking about figures like AZ, Rich Porter, Alpo, and Preacher Heatley with his Heatley crew. These were some of the real ones who left their mark. Don't forget YTC, the Yellow Top crew, who was deep in the game, and the infamous twins from Queens, Rich and Ron. 50 Cent immortalized them in his classic Ghetto Quran, when he spit, "Rest in peace to Rich and Ron, money what they was about, yo." The twins was from Queens, but got crazy cream with Alpo. These were the dudes the game feared, and their stories shaped how Harlem and Queens linked up. Let's break it down and take a deeper look at how it all went down. Gangsta Lou was part of one of the first underground hardcore rap groups to come out of the East Coast, mob style. It wasn't just him, it was AZ, Whip Wop, and Pretty Tony. Now Gangsta Lou, who's always kept it real about the struggles he faced, has openly admitted how rough his life was. He started using drugs at just 9 years old, and we ain't talking about just weed. At that age, you gotta wonder what the hell was happening at home. Raised by a single mother, Lou's story is deeper than most. In an interview with Queen's Flip, Lou shared that his pops, who was from Sierra Leone, Africa, came to the States to study computers. Once he learned what he needed, he bounced. When asked if he ever met his father, Lou said he wouldn't even recognize him if they crossed paths in the same room. That's a tough pill to swallow, especially for someone who spent so much of his youth feeling lost. With all that going on, and Harlem being what it was during those times, it's easy to see how a young Lou could fall into some of those bad habits. Growing up in a single-parent household, dealing with the absence of his father, who had come to the States from Sierra Leone studying computers before disappearing, life was already difficult for Lou from an early age. His first name was Louis, but before becoming Gangsta Lou, he was known as Boogaloo. And though the movie Paid in Full would depict Alpo and Rich Porter as AZ's closest friends long before any of that, it was Gangsta Lou who was around. He would become friends with AZ right after AZ got fired from his job at the Cleaners. Lou was the one who introduced Alpo to AZ, a decision he would later say he regretted, especially after everything that went down. He often questioned if Rich Porter would still be alive today if he hadn't connected Alpo to AZ. Lou carries that weight, feeling like his involvement led to some of the events that unfolded, leaving scars that never fully heal. As far as Alpo, he would say that they first crossed paths when he was running errands for a well-off family in the area. One day, while hustling through the streets, he saw Lou coming through, fresh, always fly, and full of confidence. Alpo couldn't help but ask, "Yo, how you getting this stuff? How you getting this money?" Lou, always one to keep it real, broke it down. He admitted that a lot of his hustle came from his uncle, who had already been in the game and showed him the ropes. Lou was always soaking up knowledge, learning from those who came before him, trying to figure out how to get to the bag. He wasn't someone who just stumbled into the lifestyle. He studied it, adapted to it, and made it his own. From that moment, Alpo knew Lou wasn't just another dude on the block. He was someone who truly understood the grind, the ups and downs, and how to maneuver through it all. Gangsta Lou's legal troubles are a bit of a mystery when it comes to exactly when they started. But one thing is for sure, he had his fair share of run-ins with the law. You don't have to dig too deep to find evidence of it either. He was featured prominently on HBO's documentary about Rikers Island, and anyone who's seen it knows that he's one of the first faces you see, and definitely one of the most memorable. Lou had that charisma, that energy that made people remember him, whether he was in the streets or behind the walls. During his time locked up, Lou built a lot of relationships with people outside of Harlem, particularly in Queens. He spoke about how his connections extended beyond his borough, solidifying ties with some of the most well-known players in the city. But one of the wildest stories he's ever shared comes from an incident that's straight out of a movie script. At one point, while he was locked up, Lou found himself needing medical attention. He was transferred to a hospital in Queens for treatment, and that's when he saw an opportunity. Lou wasn't about to sit around and wait for the system to decide his fate, so he made his move. He managed to escape from the hospital, slipping away from custody like a true mastermind. And here's where it gets even crazier. Lou headed straight to a nearby payphone. Who did he call? None other than Rich and Ron, the infamous twins from Queens. The twins, always down for their people, pulled up and scooped Lou, whisking him away to safety. For the next 3 years, Lou essentially went off the grid, hiding out in their basement in Queens. But Lou wasn't just laying low during that time. He was building connections, networking with different people in the area, and continuing to expand his reach in the game. His time in Queens wasn't just about survival. It was about solidifying himself as a figure who could navigate any borough, build relationships, and keep his name ringing in the streets. That kind of story just adds another layer to Gangsta Lou's legend, showing how he could adapt and thrive, no matter the circumstances. Gangsta Lou's tight bond with AZ always led to one big question. Why wasn't he mentioned in Paid in Full? A lot of people who know the history wondered how someone so integral to AZ's story got left out of such an iconic film. There's a few ways you can look at it. Lou himself said he spent a lot of time locked up, which might explain why his name didn't come up. But after hearing his story, it's easy to think that Lou is probably in the movie, just not called out by name. If you really pay attention to Paid in Full, there's a character that seems to mirror Gangsta Lou's vibe. Remember Noriega, the wild jail dude who didn't want people knowing if he was out or locked up? He's the one who tipped AZ off about Alpo in the film. It's not confirmed, but Lou's story lines up with that character's energy. That mysterious, unpredictable aura sounds like Gangsta Lou all day. Even with that, Lou made it clear that his relationship with AZ was deeper than just business. He was more than a street hustler in AZ's circle. He was a true friend. While it's true that some of the work Lou was hustling likely came from AZ, Lou was quick to stress that he never worked for AZ. He wasn't on AZ's payroll. He was his own man, running his own game. just with a solid connection to one of Harlem's most legendary figures. Lou's role in the paid in full story might be subtle or overlooked, but his contributions to that era and the connections he built make it clear that he was a vital piece of Harlem's history. While Gangsta Lou was deep in the hustle, he found himself crossing paths with another infamous Harlem crew, the YTC, or Yellow Top Crew. Harlem was small in that world, and run-ins like this weren't out of the ordinary, but this one would become a pivotal moment in Lou's story. It all started with Lou trying to hold it down for his man, who had beef with some individuals. Those individuals turned out to be tied to YTC, and one of them was allegedly none other than T-Tone, one of the crew's respected leaders and a certified money-getter in Harlem. The tension escalated quickly, as it often did in those days, and what began as a dispute turned into a full-blown shootout. Lou himself got caught in the crossfire and took a bullet to the chest. The incident could have been the end for most people, but Lou wasn't built like most. Even when reflecting on the situation later, he didn't flinch. He didn't frame himself as a victim or a man out for pity. Lou being Lou, he summed it up raw and real, saying, "They got at us before we could get at them." That's the kind of mentality that made him a legend. He always kept it gangster, even in the face of adversity. This wasn't just another beef. It was Harlem's underworld in its rawest form. YTC was no lightweight crew, and Lou stepping up the way he did showed not only his loyalty to his people, but also the level of respect he commanded in the streets. It's another chapter in the story of a man who lived by his own rules and survived the kind of trials that would break most. Lou wasn't just a hustler, he was Harlem personified. Though Paid in Full isn't 100% true to life, one thing the movie got right was how AZ transitioned out of the game after surviving that infamous shooting. AZ wasn't just out for self-preservation, he was making moves to step into the music business. Gangsta Lou shared a story about a conversation he had with AZ around that time that really hit different. According to Lou, AZ called him for a sit-down and laid it all out. AZ told him straight up that he was done with the streets and was selling off everything, cars, jewelry, the whole lifestyle. Then AZ turned to Lou and advised him to do the same, specifically pointing to the iced-out chain Lou was rocking at the time. This wasn't just any piece. Lou described it as massive, something reminiscent of the late great Kay Slay's iconic crown chain, flooded with diamonds. And this was back in the 1980s when wearing something like that was like waving a red flag in the jungle. AZ basically told Lou, "Man, you need to let that go." But Lou, being Lou, wasn't hearing it. He admitted he brushed off AZ's advice and kept it pushing. That same day, though, fate came knocking hard. Lou got abducted by members of the notorious Preacher Crew, one of the most feared outfits in Harlem and the Bronx. They dragged him out to 231st Street and Cortlandt Avenue in the Bronx, stripping him of his sneakers, and of course that same chain AZ warned him about. Now, I'm not sure if that whole situation with the Preacher Crew had Lou rethinking things, or if he even decided to get out of the game after that. But what we do know is he ended up forming the group I mentioned earlier, Mob Style. The crew consisted of Lou, AZ, Whip Wop, and Pretty Tony. They were pioneers in their own right, blending that street energy with rap in a way that felt authentic to the streets they came from. They didn't have the same push or mainstream spotlight as groups like Eric B. and Rakim or EPMD, but if you were in New York or tapped into the streets, you probably knew about them. Back then, platforms like Video Music Box and The Box were the go-to spots for discovering underground gems. People would call up and request the songs they wanted to see, and Mob Style's videos were definitely in rotation. They had a presence that hit hard in the streets, even without major label backing. One thing about Gangsta Lou is that his story is truly unique, full of twists, turns, and moments that intertwine with Harlem's rich history. He's teased the idea of his life being told on a full-length scale, describing it as paid in full on steroids. And honestly, he's not lying. His name pops up during some of the most significant moments in Harlem's history, both in the streets and beyond. Even in the late 2000s, Lou's influence still echoed, even popping up in a beef with Harlem rapper and Dipset member Jim Jones. It's not exactly clear what the root of the beef was. Some folks say it might have been tied to Gangsta Lou's deep connection to Harlem. He's always been about showing love to his city, and not everyone moves with that same energy. Others speculate it could have been some blood gang rivalry bubbling under the surface. Then there's talk about an incident from back in 2008 when the Diplomats found themselves mentioned on America's Most Wanted. The case involved a guy named Carlos Thompson who was reportedly associated with the Dipset movement. Thompson ended up on America's Most Wanted for his alleged role in the murder of a 15-year-old boy named Phoenix Garrett. According to the show, Garrett was selling bootleg Diplomat CDs when Thompson came across him. In a chilling turn of events, Thompson allegedly convinced a 13-year-old named Lamani DeLima to shoot and kill Garrett. The streets have their own way of twisting and stretching stories, so it's hard to pinpoint what's fact and what's just gossip amplified over time. But incidents like these, whether directly connected to Gangsta Lou or not, show how Harlem streets were a boiling pot of loyalty, rivalries, and tragedy during that era. If you were in the mix, situations like these could end up casting a long shadow over your name, whether you wanted it or not. Now, Lou being who he is, a real advocate for Harlem, always standing 10 toes down for his borough, it's no surprise he might have felt some type of way about the situation. Harlem pride runs deep, and when something as wild as that Diplomat CD murder case hits the city, people take notice, especially someone like Gangsta Lou, who's always been about respect and protecting the streets he calls home. Plus, who's to say Lou didn't have some kind of connection to the Garrett family? He's been known to have ties all over the city, and his name holds weight in Harlem. Whether it's about showing love or stepping up when things get out of hand, Lou's legacy is rooted in being more than just a street figure. He's a symbol of Harlem's strength and loyalty. That's why Gangsta Lou is someone y'all really need to know about. His story ain't just about the hustle or the music. It's about a man who's woven into the fabric of his community. From his early days to the wild stories of survival and even his influence on the culture, Lou's name rings bells. Harlem's history wouldn't hit the same without him in the mix. The West Coast, East Coast gangsta rap rivalry of the 90s defined an era in hip-hop. But it's wild how the connections between that world and the streets run so deep. Take Sean Diddy Combs, for example. Most people know him as the larger-than-life mogul who helped shape modern hip-hop. But his story has some darker ties to Harlem's underworld. Diddy's father, Melvin Combs, wasn't just any name in the streets. He had ties to Frank Lucas, the infamous heroin kingpin whose story was immortalized in American Gangster. Lucas himself confirmed the connection in interviews, even sharing a personal story about a young Diddy. Melvin Combs wasn't just a business associate. He'd bring his son around Lucas's house often. Lucas recalled how Diddy, just a little boy at the time, would try to ride a rocking horse that belonged to his daughter, only for her to push him off it. "Look at him now," Lucas later remarked. "He can build that ride out of $1,000,000 bills." For Lucas, seeing Diddy grow into a global icon was a source of pride, despite the tragedy that marked their shared history. In 1972, Melvin Combs was murdered in his car near Central Park West, allegedly for being a suspected informer. This loss undoubtedly shaped the trajectory of Diddy's life, pushing him to rise above the street life and redefine success on his own terms. Yet, the fact that Diddy's childhood intersected with Harlem's infamous drug trade shows how deeply intertwined the streets and the culture are. Lucas, who passed away in 2019, reflected on Diddy's success with a mix of admiration and respect. "That guy got rich, man. He played good, man. I'm proud to see him like that. That was Melvin Combs' son. I'm glad he did that. I pray for this kid, man. He's doing good." Things have taken a shocking turn for Diddy, who's gone from a billionaire mogul to a federal inmate at Brooklyn's Metropolitan Detention Center, sharing a dorm with none other than crypto fraudster Sam Bankman-Fried. It's surreal to imagine two of the most talked about figures of different worlds, one a hip-hop icon, the other a disgraced tech entrepreneur, now facing their respective reckonings under the same roof. Diddy, whose real name is Sean Combs, has been indicted on a heavy slate of charges, including racketeering, sex trafficking, and transportation for the purposes of prostitution. The allegations, if proven, could leave him facing years, potentially decades behind bars. A stunning fall from grace for someone who once embodied the height of celebrity and success. Interestingly, Diddy's connection to his late father, Melvin Combs, has always been a poignant and complex aspect of his story. Melvin's ties to Frank Lucas and the Harlem heroin trade of the 70s were known to some, but Sean only discovered the full grisly truth years later. While attending Howard University, he stumbled across an old issue of the New York Amsterdam News in the library archives. That's where he found the report detailing Melvin's murder, a hit tied to allegations that he was an informer. It was a chilling revelation for a young man already driven to escape his father's shadow and create a new legacy. Frank Lucas's operation was a game changer in the drug trade, breaking the mafia's stranglehold on heroin distribution by going straight to the source in Southeast Asia. Lucas's infamous method, smuggling kilos of heroin in coffins of deceased U.S. soldiers returning from Vietnam, was as audacious as it was ruthless. His network of black soldiers, operating as an army within the army, was key to pulling off this dangerous and elaborate scheme. These soldiers, loyal to their commanding officer, Master Sergeant Ike Atkinson, were integral in transporting the product to Air Force bases across the East Coast. By cutting out the middleman, Lucas secured his heroin at an unbelievable $4,200 per kilo, compared to the $50,000 price tag the mafia charged. His Blue Magic product was purer and cheaper, making it an instant hit in the streets. Lucas's ability to undercut competitors allowed him to dominate Harlem's drug market and rake in a staggering $1 million a day during his peak. Melvin Combs, who would later be known primarily as Diddy's father, was a small-time hustler at the time. His introduction to heroin dealing came directly from Lucas, who fronted him several kilos from his Golden Triangle connection. Combs became part of the crew of Willie Abraham, a well-known Harlem figure and owner of the Harlem Gold Lounge. Abraham, unlike Lucas, relied on the Gambino crime family for his supply and had already served a 5-year bid for heroin dealing. In 1971, Melvin Combs got caught up in the game, arrested for possession of heroin and a hefty stash of $45,000 in cash. Not long after, the police raided Abraham's heroin cutting mill, taking down Abraham and his crew. The raid linked them to a massive $5 million a year heroin operation spreading through Harlem, the Bronx, and Westchester County. It wasn't long before Melvin became a suspect in Alphonse Funzy Siska's eyes, head of the Gambino's New Jersey crew. Funzy suspected Melvin might have been cooperating with law enforcement, a thought that would haunt him until Melvin's untimely death. On January 26, 1972, Melvin Combs was shot in the head, ending his life at just 26. His son, Sean Diddy Combs, was only 3 years old. The New York Times reported the prosecutor in Abraham's case claimed law enforcement believed Melvin's murder could be traced back to members of the heroin conspiracy. Frank Lucas, who had dealings with Melvin, maintained his innocence regarding any connection between Melvin and the feds. In his book Original Gangster, Lucas wrote, "Melvin was flashy but good-hearted. I've been cool with him for years. He got caught up in an indictment with Willie Abraham and his people. Willie was a big-time dealer being watched by the feds. They brought him down, and Melvin was shot before the case went to trial. I heard rumors that people thought Melvin had given info to the cops. But I know that wasn't true. I just know it. That wasn't Melvin's style. But when you're dealing with life in prison, sometimes rumors are enough to put a target on your back." The day Melvin was murdered, he was meeting someone just off of Central Park West, a figure many suspect could have played a role in his demise. Who that person was, though, remains a mystery, leaving questions about loyalty, betrayal, and the dangerous world they all lived in. Lucas gave us a subtle hint about Melvin's final meeting in his book, Original Gangster. He described going to Lloyd Price's Turntable Club one night, noting how good the vibe was and how packed it was with people dancing to slow jams. While there, Lucas ran into pretty boy Melvin, someone he considered a friend. Melvin had just started dabbling in the game, Lucas wrote. I'd sold him a few kilos here and there, and we ended up becoming friendly. When Lucas asked what Melvin was up to that night, he recalls how Melvin looked around the club with a sly smile, raising one eyebrow, and said, "You know me, I'm just looking for some fun." Lucas described Melvin as the type of guy you wanted in your club, charming, charismatic, and someone the ladies loved. He wasn't the type to hang around tough guy enforcers or Gambino soldiers, so who was he meeting that night? Lucas himself seemed puzzled, suggesting Melvin wasn't the kind of guy who'd meet with male thugs, but rather someone with a different kind of influence. Could Melvin have met with one of the 3 women later convicted alongside Willie Abraham? It's a theory that makes sense. Given his reputation as a ladies' man and his comfort in the club scene, the idea of him crossing paths with women involved in the operation isn't too far-fetched. Melvin's death, shrouded in mystery, hints at connections beyond the male-dominated underworld of the time. Perhaps those connections lay with the women who were just as ruthless and dangerous, but in a very different way. Lucas's account opens the door to several possible scenarios about who Melvin may have met that fateful night. There were women like Carol Holder, the wife of Errol Holder, one of Abraham's key associates, and Margaret Logan, Abraham's girlfriend, who were known to be involved in the heroin trade. Then there was Laverne McBride, who bought heroin from the Holders to sell to other distributors, deepening the web of connections in Harlem's heroin empire. But there were other women involved as well, black female heroin cutters who played a crucial role in the operation. These women mixed milk sugar into the pure heroin to stretch the product, ensuring it could be sold to street distributors, thereby creating a $1 million racket. What makes these cutters particularly significant is that they were monitored so closely. sometimes required to mix the heroin while naked or in only panties to ensure they wouldn't pilfer the product. Melvin, known for his charm and presence in the club scene, may have found himself drawn to one of these women, whether through his reputation as a ladies' man or the connections they had in the streets. It's a theory that fits the mystery surrounding his final meeting. One thing that's for sure is that the web of organized crime in the 70s and 80s was deep, ruthless, and often deadly. Angelo Quack Quack Ruggiero and Alphonse Funzi Siska, two key figures within the Gambino family, were directly responsible for the murder of Gambino boss Paul Castellano. Castellano had a strict rule: no drug dealing within the family, period. Anyone caught dealing drugs would face the harshest punishment, and Ruggiero and Siska were two of the prime violators, dealing dope behind Castellano's back. However, instead of bringing this to Castellano's attention, John Gotti, who had grown frustrated with Castellano's leadership, saw an opportunity. Gotti believed that the tapes implicating Ruggiero and Siska would spell the end of his own influence if Castellano remained in power. So rather than comply with the orders of his boss, Gotti decided to take out Castellano himself. On the evening of December 16, 1985, Gotti and Sammy the Bull Gravano sat across the street from Sparks Steakhouse, watching as four Gambino hitmen gunned down Castellano and his bodyguard Tommy Bellotti in broad daylight. It was a hit that would reshape the mob landscape and elevate Gotti as the new boss of the Gambino crime family, but what remains unresolved to this day is the murder of Melvin Combs. Unlike Castellano, Melvin's death never saw the same kind of closure. While law enforcement suspected his connection to Abraham's heroin empire, no definitive answers were ever found. Lucas would later dismiss rumors that Melvin was a rat, insisting he knew Melvin's character well. But in the world of crime, silence often spoke louder than any explanation. Melvin's death remains one of the many unanswered questions in the tangled web of Harlem's underworld.
The shit is wicked on these mean streets, mean streets.